kind of having to make a pivot, you know. So hopefully you can bear with me on this one. Like I said, I'm definitely going to get better. And I am always mindful of what it is that I'm trying to do here. And like I said before, from the things that I've learned in life and from my experiences, we learn best from each other. And at my core, at my very core, one of the things that I've noticed about myself and one of the things that definitely keeps me fired up is, teaching. Right. Yep, had a little bit of technical difficulties for a second. I really, anyway, let me get back to it. Appreciate so that's why today that goes is Martin Luther King Jr.'s recognition day. I believe it's his actual birthday. I'm not too sure, but today I had an experience. For the first time, I went to the event that is thrown by Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity. It was at UMKC here in Kansas City, Missouri. And the panel, of course, was, the familiar names. Congressman Cleaver was there, of course, like I said, the familiar name. Mayor Quentin Lucas was also present. And it just so happens that the Kansas City police chief was also there. I think her name is Mrs. Graves, I believe. And of course, there was some political representation there as well. I'll definitely get into my thoughts on that later. But, I had the opportunity to, see a good friend or two. But that's not really what this particular podcast is about. This particular podcast or this particular thing that I want to say and I want to get out. And I felt the need to get out because, as I started off before in the other previous podcasts, telling you a little bit about my story, telling you a little bit about my life, because, I think that's important for you to understand, moving forward. And if we are, or if I want, well, if it is my intention to build a community around this thing. And the best way for me to go about that, and the reason I think it's important for me to do this, is because of the experiences in the life that I've had. When you are someone like myself, because I know I'm not the only one, and you're trying to reach somebody, or you're trying to reach people, you're presented with all types of challenges. When I was a lot younger, I never thought about it. As a matter of fact, when I was 18 years old, I had the privilege, which really turned into honor, to, lead my division in boot camp. And I know for the most part, boot camp is not or pretty much something that everybody tends to forget, as soon as they're done with done with it, and move on. But, for the ones like myself who had transformative experiences with boot camps, boot camp, it was my rite of passage in a way, because the folks that know my story, or I'm about to, well, let me just stop. Yeah, at 15 years old, I was incarcerated for a few armed robberies. Robbed a couple fast food restaurants. I was young. I was trying to figure things out based off of the understanding that I was most comfortable with in that point of time in my life. So again, that's why I say that my story has to be important, and it can potentially um, serve more than just you know my meager, humble little self. You know, and I recognize this, and it's not something that I just recently recognized. But like I said, when I had the honor to lead my division in boot camp, leadership was not something that was difficult for me because I was, for whatever reason, willing to make the greatest sacrifice. And when I look at it, it was natural for me in boot camp, only being 18 years old at the time. There were guys older than me. Yeah, same age. I don't think anybody was really younger than me. It started out with about 96 of us. I think we ended up with about 60 something of us. And the reason why leadership wasn't new to me was because when you're willing to make the biggest sacrifice, and you've made many sacrifices before, like I said, I was locked up at 15 years old. So I had a little bit of time to think about the life that I had to give up because of the choices that I made. So, with that, I had to, of course, lead myself first out of a difficult situation because, you know, for for whatever reason, or the things that when I grew up, there wasn't anybody before me. I was first. I was, I guess privileged to have that as well. Yeah, I was the first son. I was the first grandchild. Pretty much all that stuff. And I know a lot of you first out there, man. You probably can feel my pain a little bit here. And so with me, yep. So no older brothers and anything like that. Just me and my mother, really, for the most part. Especially with the type of life that I pivoted towards. Um, Unfortunately, there was no role model for me in that regard. Now, I did have a lot of people at that time, when I was younger, that I did look up to, and those gentlemen mostly, well, my auntie as well, my auntie Kim Peters, God bless her soul. She was probably the first one that I recognized that she kind of cut her own path. She kind of did her own thing. Of course, my mother was as well, but my aunt Kim, she was pretty tough with it. For everybody that knew my aunt Kim, knew that first off, you couldn't say whatever you wanted to her, and if you did slight her in some type of way, and she felt that she she needed to react in a particular way, she was definitely going to go there. So, my mother not necessarily so, but or she just handled things a little bit different. My mother's a beautiful woman, and one of the things that I learned, by watching her, is that don't let that beauty, you know, um, mislead you for anything that should be taken as it shouldn't. But anyway, so women, yes, I got the first model of really trying to handle myself from women, which of course, like my mother, very good woman, she told me at a very young age that she couldn't teach me how to be a man. And I don't know if that helped me or not, Well, yeah, it did. Hindsight, but it definitely put me on a path where, I was willing to figure some things out. And so at a young age, I wanted to figure things out and figure them out very quickly. And of course, the environment that I was in, it provided you that experience as well. But one of the things that was always a godsend and a blessing about my family is, of course, the spiritual foundation that I always stressed that we leaned on. And so that was always there. Um, I didn't necessarily go in and out of the church. Once I went out, I was pretty much out, and I stayed out. Not to say that that's something that I'm, proud of, but it is what it is. It put me on the journey where I'm at now. And so what I'm saying is that today, um, listening to Congressman Cleaver after all this time and being able to witness from a child the condition and the transition of my community, you know, again, it's not all bad. There's been ups, there's been downs, there's been left, there's been rights. But, if you pull back and you'll see that little blip that we probably went up is just a small little fragment on a line that has been on the downward spiral, especially when we talk about the quality of life. You see, that's the thing that a lot of the politicians, they want to gloss over. They want to gloss over the quality of life because ultimately they know, yeah, we can't legislate quality of life. Okay, well, what is it that you're trying to legislate? And that's where the kicker comes in. You see, because when you elect someone to office, yes, you're casting your vote, regardless if you go to the ballot or not, you're casting a vote. And it's really difficult to get people to understand that it's just more than you voting that's taking place. You even having the capacity to form an opinion on what it is that you're voting for is just as important, or what it is that you're not voting for. It's just as important. And that is the process here in the United States of America. Is one of the most treasured things that we consider, and one of the things that we are incredibly sensitive about. But unfortunately, it seems to appear that for certain political figures, it's only important when what? When election time comes. And what do we have on the horizon? OMG. Yeah, because today is not only just the day we recognize Dr. Martin Luther King. Today, they're having a caucus in Iowa. And remember, like I said, I'm going to unpack some things, or I'm going to let you know what my experience is. And maybe you can unpack some things for me, because some people have unpacked some things for me. And I invite you to help me unpack some things. And I need you to start to unpack things yourself. Because, like I said, man, this one's different. Usually I try to prepare, I try to write, because I want to be clear. I don't want to ramble. I don't want to stumble. I want to make sure that I hit every single point. And sometimes I don't necessarily do a very good job at that, because I'm not that great of a writer. And some of the things that I have on my heart, unfortunately, my fingers, my mind, and all that stuff doesn't coordinate at the speed and the clarity that I would like. Because, like I said, I'm not an academic. I didn't get 4.0s or go to a Ivy League school, but probably none of the people that are listening to me right now did neither. And guess what? Does that necessarily mean that we need to have folks that are in institutions and from backgrounds and pedigrees and fraternities and all these different things and these high accolades that, you know, a bunch of people can give to themselves? Does that mean that, you know, folks like you and I should be subject to their command and to their whim? I don't think so. I don't think so. And it's crazy because, like I said before, I listened to Congressman Cleaver when I was in the 5th grade. There was a theme about that particular free field trip. The theme was to be drug free until the year 2000. Now, yeah, of course I'm dating myself here, but you know, at that time we were going into the middle 90s, and from my purview, from where I was in my city, and some of the things that were going on around me, I was like, okay, yeah, you might not necessarily have to worry about me, but I know a whole bunch of stuff is taking place in this city. I didn't know, you know, whether I was supposed to be exposed to it or not, because by that time in my life, you know, hey, yo, it was pretty much normalized. Like I said, from 25th in college to 33rd or 35th in Cypress, it's pretty much where I spent a great deal of my life as a child. And I didn't leave Kansas City until I was 18 years old and went to the Navy. And like I said, man, being the first, you see a lot. Especially having a young mother, and she's just out there by herself. You know, the early 80s, mid 80s, going into the 90s. What was also taking place in this country? Well, Reagan was elected, and you know, a lot of people point their finger at Reagan, but we had just came from the Carter administration. We had just came from the Ford administration, the Nixon administration, the Johnson administration. Yep. Roll back the clock just a little bit. Make some associations just a little bit. And then you'll start to see, oh, there's a reason why MLK Day should have more reverence and importance to us now than it has ever been. And it has nothing to do with race. Nothing to do with race. As a matter of fact, today, one of the biggest things that shocked me was that the focus and the concern of our political figures was just that. They were saying that the greatest threat to the United States of America is Christian white people. Yes. Christian white. That's the greatest threat? Well, in that case, you know what? It's not even time for me to go there right now. But hopefully you can start to see, or you know what, forget hopefully. Let me just put it out there. When eugenics was formed, I think the concept was formed a little bit after, you know, of course, Darwin, you know, because a lot of these things are associated with Darwin and survival of the fittest and the evolution concept and biology and all these, different things, which Darwin made his voyage around the world or through however many countries. He's considered the godfather or the founder of, biology or whatnot, the study of biology. And that was in the mid 1800s, 1850s or something like that. And so the concept started as a European concept, but quickly spread across the world, because what did it ultimately do? Well, it gave people justification for some of the atrocities that were taking place around the world. And again, it's ironic, that while the Europeans were, and remember this, I was about to say a long time ago, but eugenics is still taking place, and it's alive and well today. Please believe me. But anyway, I'm not going to get into that right now. But when the Europeans were basically building this theory of eugenics and creating the doctrine for it, and creating the school around it and all these different institutions, right? Because what happens when an idea starts to manifest into a theory, and that theory becomes actionable and it becomes an ideology? Well, what happens is that you potentially unlock Pandora's box on the ignorant masses, and they won't even know it, because once they realize, and this again is the theory, once they realize what is actually taking place, there's a couple different things that will, in theory, will have immediate effect. And that being that they'll believe that they can't fight because it's too difficult. They'll believe that choices have to be made from a standpoint of survival, which means you start to surrender different type of freedoms. And there is really no telling where the oppression and the tyranny ends, because, as the good minister said, tyranny and injustice knows no end. And like I said before, this concept of eugenics might have started in Europe, but it quickly spread to the United States, or vice versa. I'm not sure. I'm not an expert on eugenics, but I know roughly about what the concept is associated with. But there was a woman who embraced the concept along with a whole bunch of other folks as well. And one of these particular folks was a woman named Margaret Sanger, I believe. I'm just freestyling right now. For real. I don't have any notes in front of me or any of those things. And like I said, I typically, try to prepare because I really want to give you value, something that you can actually look up, utilize, think about, ponder over, consider, and even reject if you need to. So I take this thing that serious because, like I said, I want it to serve as my record as well. I don't think everybody, of course my family and even my family sometimes, I don't think that they, sit and wonder, what I'm thinking all the time. They don't need to. They got their own lives. But at the same time, I do think about them, and I have appreciated the capacity that I have developed over time, not only to think about them, but to think about others as well. And I've even embraced a vocation in a profession that makes it essential for me to listen to people, to empathize with them, to understand what it is that they're looking for, what their needs are, and try to produce for them the best solution that I have possible. Every single day almost. Have been doing it for a little bit now. Proud of it. Not an expert, but working on it every single day. And even my pursuit of law school. You don't go to law school. Well, some of us don't go to law school just to put a Esquire by their name. No, you should be going to law school to actually serve your community and to be a person of integrity, a person who understands what ideas can have on people's lives. And when I listen to the congressman, and then I listen to, Mayor Lucas, which is a trained lawyer, or at least he has a law degree, or he's a law professor. I know he's a law professor. And so I know that he would have to know that his position in his role, let me not even go there. Let me not even go there. Let me just put it to you this way. If you continuously see the same thing over and over and over and over again, when do you have to start believing your own eyes? Hey, I'm telling you, because lying to yourself is a horrible thing. You are talking to a class A mental health advocate. Take care of yourself. The best way that you can take care of your mental health is not to lie to yourself. I'm telling you. Because I was lying to myself, calling myself a Democrat. Really, I never really called myself a Democrat. But there was a time. Yep, you would have put an X right by my name or circled something, Mlk Blk Democratic Party, and wearing all the clothes, wearing all the lingo, wearing all the swag. Like I said, it's MLK's recognition day today, but in 2016, there was an Iowa caucus, and guess where I was? I was in Iowa during that caucus, supporting my candidate for the Democratic Party, Bernie Sanders, the good senator from Vermont. Totally unaware, totally ignorant. Remember how I was saying before, how I gave reference to the fact that if you don't break out of a certain mindset, just to see it from a different perspective, then how do you know that it's legit, that it's verifiable? Thomas Sowell wrote an incredible book called Knowledge and Decisions. And, I know people call Tom Sowell whatever, but, produce a work that can refute his. Produce a work that can challenge what Sowell is demonstrating. And Sowell is a man. It's unfortunate that Sowell has not won the Nobel Prize in economics. And this, of course, I'm saying it, yes, because I'm a fan. So's peer group says it. What is that about? Could it have something to do maybe that he's a black man and that the person who was even credited for establishing the world was associated with eugenics? Go look it up. Go look it up. Because like I said, someone enlightened me. Someone had to show me. Now, it wouldn't have meant anything if I didn't use my own intelligence and understandings and rationality and come to conclusions about certain things and do research about certain things and even sit back, ponder, wait, and even pray on certain things to help get clarity with what it is that I was being exposed to. So you have to do the same thing. We all have to do the same thing because that's how knowledge is verified. That's how knowledge becomes knowledge. And you should make decisions off of good knowledge. But when you know certain things because of your privileged position and you see that a particular outcome is not taking place based off what it is that you know, then when do you change? When do you change your mind? I believe it was John Maynard Keynes who said, when the facts change, my mind changes. How do you make decisions? I believe it was a discussion between him and somebody. I might be wrong about that. I'm quite often wrong about these things. Like I said, I'm not an academic. I don't have an encyclopedia of information. I do read a lot of books, but that doesn't mean anything. For the most part, it just means that, I'm literate, I guess. And as simple of a statement that is, it's not even the norm anymore, or it's quickly becoming the rarity. I believe that only 60% of this population, of the adult population, is actually literate. 60%. So you're talking about 40% of the population. You put 10 people in the room, 10 average Americans in the room, black, white, red, green, or yellow, 40%. And, of course, like I said, I'm not one of those people who likes to put colors and stuff amongst people, but look at the conditions of the inner city schools, black and white, in Kansas City, Missouri. As a matter of fact, the state of Missouri. Yes, the state of Missouri. And I'm pretty sure there's some folks in some other places as well that probably can say the same thing about their states. And let's again, like I said, go back to what prompted this, I guess, MLK special podcast. Yeah, I was dropping one, but this one I felt just has to be a little bit different. I am following a formula here, and I was trying to build up, to something with the group that I was blessed to be able to put together, Alpha Male Nation. And, I've been having some discussions with some folks, and I have every intention to make this thing better, bring some folks on, have some interviews, and really cut into the quick of Kansas City and really unearth as much as I can, because, we gotta, I don't forget, or I've never forgotten the depth of corruption that has always existed in Kansas City, which goes way back. Pendergast, all of that. Like I said, organized crime, all of it. Drugs, all of it. A lot of folks don't know this, but the first reference to black mafia, that's Kansas City, Missouri. I didn't believe it myself. Heard about it. Didn't know about anybody who was a part of it. And for the most part, I didn't even think it was real. Like, oh man, what they do? Just still, Meech them concept? Nope. Nope. Not even close. Not even close. Stuff goes back a long time. And it's a tragedy because even though for the most part, I wouldn't even say for the most part, I'd say for a great deal, Kansas City has moved past a lot of that legacy. The things that we suffer from today is from what I see as the remnants of that legacy, and there is no one at at present, let me just say it, at present, committed enough to make the sacrifice necessary to be the change agent that's really needed. You know, it's like I know how much of a small fry I am, and that's why I typically, when folks say anything about why me? Ain't nothing special, but that doesn't make me happy, man. It actually makes me sad and frustrated because I know there's a lot of good folks out there in this city who care about this city, who care about this community, but most of the time, you know what they've turned out to be? I'm not gonna cuss or anything like that, but they're just fake, man. Just straight up fake. Straight fake. And fake to the point of almost being Hollywood. And that's strange because it's like, yo, yeah, Walt Disney might have came from Kansas City, but remember, Disney left and went out to Hollywood to create a fantasy land. And it seems as if, for the most part, the folks who want to be the so-called stewards of the community, and or at least from the political positions, they are just straight up Hollywood, you know, performers, and it's like all down the line, catchphrases and things that sound good. Yeah, they claim to have done the work, but how? How? But anyway, I'm gonna go ahead and wrap that up here. Um, Definitely, like I said, we'll be getting back to the development of alpha male nation. Like I said, because even me, taking this time out to put this one together for a particular purpose, like I said, it's kind of pretty much a response to what I went through today it's a beautiful event, though. I mean, beautiful event. One of the things that you can always say about the brothers at the fraternities and everything is that they can put together some stuff that looks very good, and it feels good to be in the room. But guys, that's not gonna get us there. Ladies, that's not gonna get us there. Boys and girls, old, young, black, purple, green, and yellow. The performance stuff is not going to get us there, and we are dealing with way more than just so-called racism from white Christians. Um, I don't even want to start there. We're dealing with some situations that are global in nature and scale. And if you weren't given the goggles, so to speak, to see, man, you probably won't even be able to make the connection. But it's right there, though. I promise you, it's right there. There's a reason why folks keep talking about low income housing. What does that mean? Okay, yeah, I understand you don't have any money today, but are you trying to get some money? Are the folks who say they want to see you progress, are they getting out your way so you can get some money? Or are they creating the opportunities for you to get some money? Because that's what you should be talking about. And that's where the conversation switches up. See, that's what I found out. When I was with the Bernie Bros and all that. Oh, yeah. We can go kick down some doors and we can go rah, rah, rah about, the N word and all this and all that. But when it comes to the real economic development, and I'm not talking about just giving a check to a developer. What does that do? Giving a check to a developer. You got 20 barbershops out here. You got 20 garages out here. You got dude doing hair or the chick doing hair, and then the dude driving the Uber. All these folks out here, they not in business too? But anyway, like I said, I'm gonna stop. Peace, love, happiness, and please, man, don't forget to like and subscribe, and reach out to me if you want to.
My assumption, if you put it up here, that it was time to eat. So, thank you. I said my blessings. Go ahead and eat. Thank you, Mayor, and to all of the brothers and sisters in this room. I appreciate the fact that we pause on this Martin Luther King birthday, not just because Dr. King was an alpha, but I think also because he transcended just about every line, every border that there was. And as some of you may know, particularly those members of St. James, I was raised by the giants in the civil rights movement. I was not a giant. I was raised by them. When I was 15 years old, I did something extremely stupid, probably a lot of times after 15, but for sure 15. And in Wichita Falls, where we lived at the time, we could not go to the movies if you were black. So we had 3 movies on the main street through town. And at age 15, I organized and got about 100 stupid kids to follow me to march down. We walked around to the 3 theaters all on the same street, and we put 50 cents up, which is how much it cost. And then said, we're going to allow blacks in our theater. And we didn't say blacks. So we'll move on one by one. And I found out as an adult, I was a grown man. My father was walking on the other side of the street with a 38. I was a grown man with children before I found out that fact. But what happened was, I was called, or my parents were called by a man named Fred Shuttlesworth. I was so pleased to see a picture of him earlier. And for those of you from St. James, you probably saw him live because every chance I could get him up here to preach, I did. I want to do this quickly and try to connect it so you can understand it. I want to start out by saying that I followed a man named Phil Lawson as pastor of St. James. Phil Lawson is the younger brother of James Lawson. And James Lawson is, without any doubt and fear of contradiction, the most significant civil rights leader in this country that people don't know. And so James Lawson was somebody who everybody went to, and I'll get to that in a minute. But Philip Lawson got into trouble as the pastor of St. James because he turned over the St. James parsonage to my cousin, the president of the Black Panther Party, Pete O'Neill. And he got in trouble. The bishops, all of the Methodist churches around the state, had a meeting in Clinton, Missouri, to try to vote him out. He quit. The Panthers were also at that meeting. But I followed Philip Lawson, who, as I mentioned, was the younger brother of James Lawson. James Lawson was the person who, without his leadership, we would not have had Martin Luther King. James Lawson was a man of tremendous courage, and what happened was he was a pacifist. He was drafted to go to Korea in the Korean War. He refused. Gladly went to prison, stayed almost 3 years, left prison and went to India and studied under Gandhi. He leaves India, comes back to the United States, he's pastoring in Los Angeles. He meets Martin Luther King Jr. And he tells Dr. King, he said, I've been hearing about you and reading about you, and I'm here to tell you that one of the things you've got to have, if this movement is going anywhere, is nonviolence. And he said, I've learned it from the greatest, the great Mahatma, Gandhi. And so Dr. King said, okay, I'm buying into it, but I need you to come down south if you're going to do this. And so Jim Lawson petitions the bishop for people of Methodist, AMEs, United, AME Zions, CMEs. He asked the bishop if they could get him into the south. They got him into Memphis, which is significant. Found that later. And so he goes to he goes to Nashville, and immediately he starts teaching people who later would be called freedom riders. He created, in the basement of the church in Nashville, counters like the tables here, and he trained people to go by, and people would call them the N-word and do all kinds of things to get them ready to march, because nonviolence meant nonviolence. It meant no matter what they said, you can't even respond verbally back. This is the philosophy of the great Mahatma Gandhi. And so he trained John Lewis. SNCC folk were trained by Jim Lawson. And so I'll bring him up in just a minute, a little bit more. Dr. King started out in Montgomery, his first church assignment, the Dexter Avenue Baptist Church, Montgomery, Alabama. Anybody from Montgomery? So he goes to Montgomery, but the first thing on his mind is finishing his dissertation for his PhD. So there had been a big tumult because people had become angry with the fact that the Montgomery bus system would not allow African Americans to ride on the bus unless they sat in the back, or they could ride if they would give their seat up to a white person who came on the bus. Great tumult, because almost 80% of the bus riders were black, and no black bus drivers. So the community was up in arms. Dr. Ralph Abernathy, one of my mentors, who's also frequented at St. James, that's Dr. King's best friend. He pastored the First Baptist Church, and that's where the meeting was held. It was held because they had set it up. This is the second time they had set it up for a woman to get on the bus. And when she denied the right to sit where she wanted, they knew she would be arrested. But Rosa Parks was not the first woman. There was another woman who had been selected first. They later changed their mind because she had a child out of wedlock. And they knew that they were going to do everything they could possibly do to pour slop on that effort. So they chose Rosa Parks. And Rosa Parks did exactly what they knew she would do, that is, she was going to sit down and she would move. And frankly, she had been arrested before too. I got to tell you, that wasn't the first time she had been arrested. But if you saw, for those of you who may have ever seen Rosa Parks, she's just a little, you think a little quiet person, but it's in here. It's in her spirit. So Dr. King didn't go to his best friend's church that night because he was working on his dissertation. At about 10 o'clock, his best friend, with a group of others, came to the door. Ralph Abernathy said, Martin, you just been elected president of the Montgomery Improvement Association. Didn't come to church. Dr. King is like, I don't know what's going on, but he accepts it, and then he becomes the president of the Montgomery Improvement Association. The name was changed to the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. So Dr. King continued to pastor his church, the Dexter Avenue Baptist Church in Montgomery, which is still there. He named his second son Dexter, who was an actor in LA now. And Martin then began this movement that we all knew about or read about. And Jim Lawson was the tactician. He was the brains about, I'm not suggesting at all, Dr. King, probably 200 IQ, was not smart. I'm saying Jim Lawson had a knack of knowing how to put things together, to make them work. And so then came the man named Fred Shuttlesworth. Fred Shuttlesworth pastored in Birmingham, which he later renamed Birmingham. It was Birmingham because between 1947 and 1955, there were 50 bombings, including 2 at the home of Fred Shuttlesworth. They have a place in Birmingham called Bombing Hill. You probably remember the little girls who were killed in the church, going to Sunday school. But there were a lot of bombings And so Fred Shuttlesworth renamed it Birmingham. And so we sent a letter to Dr. King and asked Dr. King if they would come down and help with the movement. They were going to try to get people to vote. Trying to get people to vote. And people would not allow African Americans to vote. They'd let a few come in and vote, and then they would stop them when they tried to vote. So they started what was called the Birmingham movement. And in Birmingham, they were marching and picketing, and Martin King and Ralph Abernathy were arrested. Now, it's going to be hard for you to take this. The crime, chief, that they were arrested for on the paperwork, was race mixing. Martin Luther King Jr. went to jail. Ralph Abernathy, charged with race mixing. And so, while they're in jail, 8 members of the clergy, Christian clergy, wrote an open letter to the newspaper. And in that letter, they criticized Dr. King, and they said, "You are unwise and untimely. You should not be rushing this movement." They went on to criticize Dr. King by saying, "We are Christians and we want the right thing to happen, but we think you ought to take your time as you move through Birmingham." And Dr. King read the letter over and over and over again, and then he finally decided he had to respond to the letter. And there comes what you know today as the letter from a Birmingham jail. He actually rewrote it later, but he wrote that letter. And in his letter, he started out by telling the 8 members of the clergy that I'm a pastor. I'm a pastor. I've gone to seminary, one of the top seminaries in the country. I went to Boston University, Boston's theological seminary. I'm a pastor. And he goes on to say, and so was my daddy. And so was my daddy's daddy. And so was my daddy's daddy's daddy. And they all pastored the same church. So I'm not some scum coming into Birmingham, bootleg preacher. And he goes on to talk to them about how can you sit in those churches with the golden steeples, with all of the cushioned seats, and not have an understanding that if you are doing this in the name of God, then you know that God is going to always be on the side of those who are oppressed, those who are misused, those who are down and out, those who can't eat where they want to eat. God has a whole history of being with those who are down and out. I mean, by God, that's why Moses had help coming out of Egypt. And so, the Birmingham movement was successful, as was the Montgomery. But then, later on, the people in Memphis were having problems. And the sanitation workers there were not making the same if you were black as the white sanitation workers, and 2 black workers had been killed. And so James Lawson, stay with me. James Lawson writes his friend Martin King a letter, and he said, "We need you to come to Memphis." Martin Luther King calls a board meeting. The vote, I think it was 38-1, not to go. Only Dr. King voted to go. This was his friend. And Dr. King stands up at the board meeting, 334 Auburn Avenue, Northeast Atlanta, Georgia. And he says, I understand why everybody would vote, and you're right, it is a scary place right now. There's a lot of tension there. He said, but I'm going to go ahead myself. Dr. King is a master psychologist. So then Andrew Young says, well, I think I'm going to go with you. And then Shuttleworth said, well, I'm going. Then C.T. Vivian said, well, I'm going. Brother, too, C.T. Vivian says, I'm going. Pretty soon, everybody's standing up. They were not happy because they thought this was a very, very dangerous endeavor, because while the Klan wasn't active in Memphis, the regular racists, this everyday word, as my youngest son used to say, and they were worse. So they go to Memphis, primarily because Jim Lawson asked them to come to Memphis. You know the story, April 4th, 1968. But there's something that happened the night before that I want to share with you, then I want to talk about the letter that Dr. King sent. Martin Luther King went to Memphis to the Holiday Inn, just so you know. Somebody, we believe that it was Jerry Hoover, notified all of the media, that Dr. King was at the Holiday Inn. And went on to say, well, why would a black man who believed in black business go to the Holiday Inn when there is a black-owned motel here in Memphis? Big argument in the movement, in the room at the hotel. Dr. King says, I want to move immediately. We're going over to the Lorraine. Andrew Young, still alive, but in Atlanta, just with him a couple of months ago. Andrew Young said, no, boss, you can't go. It's too bad, the threats. And he said, no, we can't do that. We can't stay. He said, we can't secure the Lorraine Motel. We cannot secure it. And he said, well, we've been to a lot of places that we couldn't secure. So then they pack up and go to the Lorraine Motel. Now, Dr. King's best friend, Ralph Abernathy, one of my mentors, the night before, Dr. King had delivered essentially his eulogy. But he stood on the balcony after Ralph Abernathy had told him, he said, I'm the boss, I'll be with you no matter what happens. Dr. King said, well, if I die, you take over. Abernathy said, no, if you die, I'm going to die, but I'll be standing right there with you. And the record shows that they delivered lunch to the room. Jesse Jackson was in there. He and Dr. King had an argument the night before, so Dr. King always made up with people by inviting them to lunch. That's why Jesse was in the room. Andrew Young was in the room. Roselle Williams was in the room. Ralph Abernathy was in the room. They go out on the balcony to talk to a man named Ben Branch, big jazz band leader, who was going to play the music the next night at the rally. And Dr. King leans over the balcony and he says to Ben Branch and the people in the choir, he said, I want you to make sure you play You Do Precious Lord and sing it pretty. And then the shot went off. Just before the shot went off, Abernathy walked back into the room. Wow. And of course, as you may have read, he was angry for years that he went back into the room. Birmingham caused Dr. King to do a lot of work cerebrally when he wrote his response. And the thing that I think we're faced with today that I am absolutely convinced that where Dr. King would be. And Martin was in town at the Martin, the fourth was here. I didn't get in town to see him. My wife had a chance to talk with him. I was going to run this by him to see if he agreed with me. I'm pretty sure he does. One of the things he kept that Dr. King kept telling the people in Birmingham, the good clergy people, is that one of the reasons you ought to fight injustice is that injustice is mobile.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
It just won't hang out in one place.
That's right.
You let it grow here, and it's going to spread.
Right.
And so, he said, if you're not concerned about what's happening right here, you need to be interested somewhere else. And let me tell you this, I'm almost finished now. Fred Shuttlesworth told me to say a point like this. You heard it every Sunday by your pastor. When I was a sophomore in college, a sophomore in high school going into my 11th grade year, I got a job. My father helped me get this job. He knew the people that owned the company, Barnes Maintenance Company. And that primary contract was with Shepherd Air Force Base, which is the only thing in Wichita Falls that keep Wichita Falls open. And I got a job working at cleaning up the SAC base, the Strategic Air Command. I mean, it was a big deal. I got a badge, and some of you haven't gotten a badge. I got a badge. I still have it. I mean, I wasn't just some 15, 16-year-old. I had a badge. So, and I cleaned that place up with joy and dignity. And then, one Saturday night, getting dressed in my room. We lived in, at that time, we got out of the shack and we were moving in, we were living in public housing. And we had 3 bedrooms. Well, the dining room was converted to my parents' bedroom. My sisters, 3 sisters, they had room together and I had my room. So I'm in my room, putting on my stiffly starched khaki pants, my pink bandana shirt, and pink socks to match. I had sprinkled some JDs. I'm not walking the name. And so I walked to the door on my way to Billy Vash's party. Lord help. So I get to the door and the telephone rings and my father answered it. We were real poor. I was telling people they don't understand this, but our dog ran away, went to the dog pound. That was Chico. Yeah. So I knew when I heard my daddy saying, Mr. Bond, don't worry, he'll be right down there shortly. And so Daddy hung up the phone and he said, son, the guy was supposed to clean up at the J.C. Bennett store didn't show up. Mr. Bond wants you to go down. So I went back to my room, I took off my silver starched khaki pants, I took off my pink bandana shirt, my pink bandana socks, I wiped the JDs. I went on into the store down in the store and I was sweeping. And as I'm sweeping, Satan walks in the front door. I was looking at him when he turned the handle. He came in, he stood there for a minute, looking. Then he came right down the center aisle, he came to me, Cleveland. He said, everybody you know is at Billy Vash's party, but you. He said, if I were you, I wouldn't take it. And he left. He didn't go out to the center, he went around the side and out the front door. And so after he left, I started thinking, gee, he was right. I don't think I can go to jail now, but what I did after that was I went around and changed the price tags on hundreds of items in JCPenney. And so, if you showed up Monday, you could get gold earrings for 39 cents. A JCPenney washer and dryer for $3.98. Or buy one, get one free. Men's Fruit of the Loom underwear, $439 installed. And so it taught me the lesson that injustice travels.
Yeah.
It travels. You know, you make me miss the party. Then I do something to JCPenney. It travels. But Dr. King would today be concerned about this Christian nationalism that is taking over the whole country.
Come on.
And it is one of the most dangerous things going on in this country right now.
Yes, it is.
And it is frightening. There is a kind of embracing of this new concept, in spite of the fact that the word God does not appear in the United States Constitution not one single time. Now, all 50 of the states have God in somewhere in the Constitution, but not the Constitution that founded the United States of America. Not one single time. Most of them were not Christians. And those who were fleeing religious intolerance in Europe, mainly England. But today, this Christian nationalism is moving and sweeping the country. I heard somebody last night on, maybe you heard it on one of the cable stations, a religious leader reading and talking about who God had put in office. Last night. And seriously saying that this is who God wants. Look, God is a God of the whole world. But keep this in mind. Nobody can pimp God. And what we saw and what we're seeing now is people attributing their conduct, especially in Washington, to God.
That's right. Come on, God.
God is directing this, and God is putting people in office. And so, it is my conclusion that Dr. King would have to deal with this Christian nationalism. And we can't use God to justify things we do. We can do it, it's just not going to win out in the end. And so, people will say, as our new speaker, he's a good person, the Lord loves him. Lord loves him. He said that the Lord put him there as a speaker. God didn't send me to Congress.
That's right.
I was hoping he would. But God is, we're trying to bring God down to our side and our mess.
That's right.
And God is just as much God to somebody who's horrible as he is to those who are trying to be decent. But we don't control God. A lady comes up to me in the church years ago. She said, Rev, I was praying last night. God told me to tell you to preach on mercy next Sunday. I said, okay. I said, of course, now last night I was at home, and I don't know why God couldn't come out of my house. He told you, but I was at home. Julius Caesar said, men willingly believe
Well,
what they wish.
that's right. Say it.
And that is dangerous. And we're having to deal with that right now. Let me close now. So Fred sat on his head right now. We need to understand the mayor pro tem and the mayor would say, you know, we've got to have people voting. And we need for people to vote. But we need people to be involved in every realm of life that makes life better in the United States of America and around the world. We have been uniquely blessed in the United States of America. We have oceans between us, which is why we haven't been engaged in a lot of wars. We have been uniquely blessed in the United States. I'll conclude by telling you this about two of my favorite theologians. Bonhoeffer is a great theologian, and nobody gets out of seminary without embracing Dietrich Bonhoeffer. I want to talk about Linus and Lucy. Great philosophers, great teachers. Linus is watching television, and Lucy walks in and says, Linus, change the channel. Linus says, and who are you to come in here and tell me to change the channel? She looks at him, and she holds up her right hand, and she said, do you see this? Watch. She said, when these come together, they create a force and power that you have never even imagined. So, Linus said, well, what channel do you want to do? So, as he's coming back from the TV to go sit down, he brings his hands up. He said, why can't y'all get together like that? And I always wondered if God is saying that to us. You know, to us. The majority of the people in this town, and the majority of the people in this county, and the majority of the people in this state and in this nation are good and decent people. No matter what you see, all of the ugliness you see, but the majority, we could not function if the majority were all hoodlums and crooks. We couldn't hire enough police. The majority are not. They're good and decent people. They see that things need to happen. They observe all kinds of ugliness, but they do so from that sofa. We have to get together, come together, men and women, working on the common things that are tearing us apart. And if the sleepy folks would just wake up, if the criticizing folks would just shut up, and if the mean folk would just sweeten up, and if the down and out folks would look up, and if the false enemies would make up, and if the mind of racial haters just open up, and if the spiritual slowpokes would just speed up, and Martin Luther King's dream would come true. I'm wrapping up now.